McDade, an actor and editor working in the television and film industry here in Los Angeles.
And I'm Liz McDade, a small business owner in Santa Cruz, California. And this is Trenchcoat Cigar Peugeot Wandering with Columbo. And in each episode, we'll bring you a little Hollywood history, glamour, and behind the scenes as we walk you through Columbo, one of America's greatest TV detective series.
That's right.
And today we're talking about Season 1, Episode 2, Ransom for a Dead Man.
Oh, yeah. So on the IMDb, it said episode 0. So I guess, but yeah, for us, this would be the second episode.
Yeah, I saw that also, that this is listed as another pilot. So it's like they had 2 pilots, which is weird.
Yeah.
So the drink for this episode is bourbon, and we'll get to that, but one of the main characters enjoys a glass of bourbon, and then the snack is chili, and we'll also talk a lot about that today later. So I have a summary. In this episode, the main character is a woman named Leslie Williams, who kills her husband, Paul Williams, in their home and tries to make it look like he's been kidnapped and is being held for ransom. And meanwhile, her stepdaughter, Margaret, comes home from her fancy boarding school in Zurich at the news that her dad's been kidnapped. Margaret suspects her stepmom pretty early on, maybe partly because Leslie has to break her daughter's trust in order to pay the, quote, ransom. And Columbo suspects Leslie, Mrs. Williams, because of a few small loose ends, and he ends up using the stepdaughter to help trap her.
Yeah.
Did I miss any major plot points there, Paul?
That sums it up pretty good. There's a lot of different twists and turns and stuff, but
yeah, this is a pretty fun episode, which we'll get into.
Yeah.
The very opening scene is Leslie Williams alone, sitting at her desk, and she's making a ransom note out of cut up pieces of paper. And I want to make one small wardrobe observation, that she has these really awesome, giant, shiny silver rings on her fingers.
Yes.
And she is using a reel-to-reel in order to capture a little snippet of his voice.
Yeah, the ring, by the way, that ring is so cool. The one that is on her right hand is like really round.
Yeah.
It's on the right hand to the second to last finger. It looks like you could do like an imprint with wax on a letter. It's got this kind of raised.
Yes.
It's kind of gold, like the band's gold and the top silver. She still has that ring. I found an interview with her.
What?
Yeah, on the Directors Guild, the DGA. There's a really good interview. They do good interviews on there. It's like a 6-part thing. Barbara Koppel, the documentarian filmmaker, she interviews Lee Grant, because Lee Grant's done documentaries too as a director. But it's the same ring. At first I wasn't sure, but I took shots of it, screenshots, and like would freeze frame throughout Columbo and then throughout the interview, and I'm pretty sure it's the same one. Yeah, it's so interesting.
That is so cool. Yeah, it's a cool looking ring, and it kind of helps set her character up for who she is. You know, she's this like professional woman, kind of this glamorous professional woman.
Oh yeah.
With some confidence.
Lots of confidence.
Lots of confidence. Too much, it turns out, unfortunately. One other thing I wanted to note about the desk in this opening scene is that it has these 2 like short blue glass bottles that look like, for your old-fashioned pen, like inkwells,
Wait, which disc? The one where she's doing the cutting up the pictures?
Yeah, that's kind of cool little, like, vintage detail there that I liked.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'll look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can watch all the episodes for free on IMDb, and also where else, Liz?
Oh yeah, I've been watching them on Amazon Prime.
On Prime, exactly. Yeah.
And actually, I'll talk a little bit about the CEO of Amazon in a minute.
Okay, cool.
So moving on to scene 2, or the next quick, that's a really short scene of you see her preparing, and then very quickly after we get a shot of their amazing home, and the husband comes home and he walks into this glamorous foyer, and he has a little golden tray that he puts his mail in, and I love that. Now what we've been doing is we put our mail on the floor in the laundry room these days,
Yeah.
and we let it like air out and disinfect itself. So I love seeing this tidy little golden mail tray. It seemed very classy.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And you know, one thing too, I noticed with the car driving up and then other cars at night is that flare they use. I wonder if that was I
Yeah.
meant to do more research, but I feel like it was almost something that the editor, Edward M. Abrams, if that's how you pronounce his name, did, because there's a lot of really good, interesting editorial stuff in this movie. But did you notice that with the
Mm-hmm.
flares?
Yeah. Oh, you mean like coming off the headlights?
Yes, yeah. Whenever the yeah,
Yeah.
and then they even do like a subsequent edit with her eyes that are
Yes.
it's really creepy.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I did notice that. That was cool. Another thing that's kind of cool about this scene is that we get a feel for the home, and it has this amazing black and white checkered floor, these
Yeah.
enormous ceilings. I mean, these ceilings are massive. Crystal chandeliers, marble fireplace, bright white carpet, which I just love. I mean, in our house, that would be like brown in 3 days.
Yeah, most people's.
Yeah, not here. It is like glistening white carpet. I love it. And I'll get talk more about the house. But this is the scene where Paul Williams, Leslie Williams's husband, gets killed. So he bends down to burn his mail in the fireplace, and then he's startled to see Leslie, who's sitting down in a chair in the living room in front of the fireplace, and she shoots him.
Yeah, and the edit of that is so like it'll turn it into still images, and then they either the editor or someone had the image get pushed into. So it's just like a still, and then they either recorded it with another camera or he had an effect. But you know what? Yeah, now that I think about it, they're doing this on flatbeds. I don't know if they did have special effects really.
What's a flatbed?
It's what you would do the 35 millimeter film, because these were 35 millimeter film. Yeah, so it's like a reel to reel. It's basically like the tape recorder she has. If you put it right side up, and then you put like a little camera or a little TV that had a light that showed the film through, and so you would see like a little projector image, so you could move. You have like these two handles.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And you do it with all film, like Super 8, 8 millimeter, 16 millimeter. Even the audio is the same because you have to marry the audio. And the more I think about it, yeah, they must have done a lot of work with that particular scene where she shoots him. I don't know if you remember it, just the camera, the images stop, and it's like, it's just a still photograph because you see the flash of the gun and Lee Grant's just sitting there in the same position, and that they're just pushing into the picture. So it's just a still that you're looking at. It's not actually
Oh, okay.
her moving. It's like it's a photograph at this point, and they're just sort of pushing into the photograph.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, yeah, I made a note about that. I just referred to it as the special effects. And it kind of helps dramatize the murder scene and kind of slows it down. And it also gives us a chance to see Leslie, who shows it looks like she shows zero
Yeah,
emotions in this moment. It's a little
yeah.
disturbing.
She's a snake. Yeah.
She is. Yeah, she's bad. And she miraculously loads him into her car somehow by herself.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, she must be pretty strong.
Yeah. And we get to see their driveway in the it has this like sort of fountain kind of centerpiece to the driveway that she goes around. And then this is in this scene we also get a good feel for the music. You know, you kind of it's really important to this scene, I guess you would say. It's like mostly musical. So I looked up the music, and it was done by Billy Goldenberg,
Yeah.
and I looked up him a little bit on IMDb. So it looks like he did music for 7 Columbo episodes, including some of my favorite episodes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And he was a working composer for many years. His last composing credit is 2017.
Really?
So that's like a 40-year span. Yeah.
Which one was that?
I don't remember, but I did see some of his credits that I recognized were Kojak and The Love Boat.
And Rhoda.
Oh, okay. What's Rhoda?
It was a TV series. She was from Mary Tyler Moore. She was a friend of Mary Tyler Moore's.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And then
Very
there
cool.
was a few where he wasn't credited. It said like Fun with Dick and
Huh.
Jane. That's always interesting to me because as an actor, you can do a movie and then if they cut your scene and you can just even be just in the background because you can still get credit even if you're in the background if it's distinct enough, but they'll say uncredited. You'll find that with even big actors, or I should say well-known or character
Yeah.
actors. But yeah, as the composer, yeah, it said uncredited. And there's even a writer on this one, Gene Thompson, who did many television shows. He only got credit on one Columbo, but on this one, he's listed in the IMDb page, but it's uncredited. It says in parentheses, uncredited. Just like the film editing, it said Edward M. Ambrose and then John Elias, uncredited. So I have a lot of sympathy for for that because I totally get it. It's like you're always going from job to job, and these are really big gigs, but a lot of these guys look like they did really well in terms of keeping busy. And yeah, it's interesting that I wonder how they knew to put their name in there. If that was like some of these people have passed on.
Right.
It might say uncredited.
They're probably not going into IMDb and editing things on their own.
Exactly. So I'm curious, like who actually did that for some of these individuals? Yeah. So when she dumps the body over, it's this slow dissolve showing her face, a close up, and then the lights of her car are underneath her eyes, and it's just really wonderful. I'm going to mention a lot of editing things.
Good. Yeah, it's a cool effect. I appreciate that. Some of the later Columbos, I feel like we see less of those sort of special editing effects that we see here. I just want to point out that, so she, like you said, she dumps his body in the ocean and it's just so cruel to watch. It's like, oh my God, like so heartless. Yeah, so she's gotten rid of the body, then she ditches his car and mails the fake ransom letter. Then the next scene, she's back at the house, and this is where we meet our signature drink. So she pours herself, I'm guessing it's a bourbon or a whiskey because it's like a brown liquor. She pours herself a little glass and she kind of looks pleased with herself.
All right.
And so this is where we get our drink. And you know what, Paul? I didn't realize that I'm having whiskey, not bourbon, because I guess they're two different things.
Yeah. Just like the champagne I had, it wasn't really champagne because it wasn't from France. Yeah, I'm not this. Yeah, good stuff, but sorry, connoisseurs out there.
It's okay though. I know. I'm having a Bushmills Irish whiskey on the rocks, and it's quite delicious. So.
And this one, I believe, I mean, I have celiac, but according to the Celiac Association, one of those, they said bourbon is okay to drink.
Okay.
Because I guess in the distillery process, the wheat is killed. The gluten in the wheat is killed.
Ah, okay.
But, I don't normally do this. This one is bulletproof, I think. We had Maker's Mark, but this one looked, St. John thought this one would be better.
Fancy. Yeah, I just had a sip of mine, Bushmills.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, mine is really good too.
Cheers.
Cheers, Paul.
Where are the kids at, Liz?
Oh man, who knows?
I don't know where mine are.
Starting fires in the kitchen, probably. No, I'm just kidding. Elliot's with the kids. Oh. It's all good. But I wanted to take this moment to talk about the house. This amazing home. So I looked it up, and they have the location listed. It's 10644 Bellagio Road, which is in Bel Air. Ooh. And I did a little deep dive on this house. Guess how many square feet this house is, Paul?
What's a normal house? 500?
A normal house would be like, our house is 1,200. Your house is probably like 2,000 square feet. That's the total square footage.
Okay.
Like this total, like every room, each floor, not including basements or garages usually.
Well, that one, let's see from the outside. Yeah, so that's, what is it, like 3,000 square feet or 5,000?
It's 40,000 square feet. This house is bananas.
What does it got?
40,000 square feet, 60 rooms.
Wow.
60 rooms.
That sounds scary.
I know, right? So it was built in the 1930s. in Bel Air Country Club, like sitting on 8 acres looking out over Bel Air Country Club. It has a name, of course. It's Casa Encantada. 60 rooms. Every room has a view of the city or the ocean or the country club. No neighbors. It's just its own little refuge in the middle of the city. Right now, it's for sale.
Oh, wow.
So if you're on the market, it's only $225 million.
That's it?
That's it.
Whoa, man.
The cool thing about the, no, I don't know, crazy.
I have to take out a loan for that.
Yeah, you might have to get a
Get
loan.
one of those subprime loans and
Probably can't pay cash for this. So, a little history about the house. So, it was built in the 1930s over several years by a woman named Hilda Weber, who came into money through, I think, through a marriage. It took several years to build it. And then Hilda only got to live in it for 10 years before she had to sell it because she was just burning through money and she basically ran out of money. So, it sold the last 2 times it's sold, it has set a record for the most expensive home in the United States. And right now, it's on the market again as it'll be the most expensive home in the United States if it sells for $225 million. And the little Amazon nod is that I saw in one of these like online, it was either fortune.com or somewhere else, it said that Jeff Bezos might be on the market for Casa Encantada.
oh, Jeff Bezos is gonna buy it?
Well, what I saw online, I haven't talked to him personally in a while, but what I saw online is that he was visiting, looking at real estate in Los Angeles, which might include this house. Crazy home. You can see some pictures on it online too, since it's for sale right now. And you can see it looks the same as it does in this episode. The beautiful, like, sort of columns at the front. It's white with a brown door and tall white columns. And then you see the like circular. I don't know if it's a fountain or what, but there's like this big cement circular structure in the driveway that you kind of drive around, and then there's just like gardens, fountains and gardens, and I think there's a pool, and it's just ridiculous. So Casa Encantada. So yeah, Google it if you want to see some of the pictures of this ridiculous home.
Did any celebrities live there?
It didn't say. I didn't see. Yeah, when I was looking, it didn't say online.
Oh, okay.
But I did note that I didn't see. So, IMDb has all this cool like location information.
Okay.
Where you can see where things were filmed, and I think you can see when things appear in other, like you can go to a location and maybe see that it's been in other things as well.
Yeah.
But anyhow, and just Googling this house, I don't think it's been in other TV shows or movies.
Oh, yeah. Those ceilings. I thought that was like a stage. I mean, it's so crazy.
I think I saw on here it was 18-foot ceilings. Yeah, 18 feet high. That's really high. Yeah.
It looks taller than that.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that's what I saw. Bananas. Okay, so we're going to add that house, Paul, to our Colombo bus tour.
Okay, yeah.
Of Colombo sets, locations. All right, should we move on to the next scene in the courtroom?
Yeah.
So we get to see Leslie's legal skills, and she's pretty spectacular. She's like chatting with her associate and hearing the testimony at the same time. I was impressed. And so
and she made the jury laugh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she did a good job. So she appears to best the defendant or whoever. Who is it? It's the person suing her client, an insurance company. But then she does have a little saving grace where she kind of reprimands her client and says, I've seen those apartments that you manage, and you better do better of taking care of them, or it's going to be a lot worse next time or something. So she kind of reprimands them, which is nice, even though she's a total like psychopath.
Yeah.
She shows a small amount of compassion there.
Yeah, she knows what to say. What did you think about her performance?
Yeah, I thought she was amazing. I thought She did a really good job of conveying like very subtle character traits,
Mm-hmm.
throughout the episode. Like I have a note here about how she behaves, when she's with Columbo, and then there's an FBI agent that she's kind of flirty with.
Yeah, that guy's a really well-known actor, Harold Gould. He plays Agent Carlson.
Mhm.
Just real quick, he was in. I always remembered him in Love and Death with Woody Allen.
Oh.
But anyway, go back to what you were saying with her performance.
Yeah, I was impressed with her overall. I mean, she has a strong I got a strong sense of who she was as a person, and that she had a lot of interesting pieces to her personality. So this, her courtroom performance, and then later on in her interactions with her stepdaughter, I thought she just did a really good job of she never shows like a ton of emotion, she's always kind of very controlled. I was impressed.
Yeah, me too. I knew who she was. I think the first film I remember her in was Defending Your Life with Albert Brooks and Meryl Streep, and she plays her and Rip Torn play guides in heaven. Like they show you reels of your life and what you could have done better, and I always thought she was interesting to watch. And then I'd heard about her through other people, but she was an actor's studio teacher
Oh.
like Ellen Burstyn, and that's no small job. But she had the top teachers like Lee Strasberg, and then the first one was Sam Meisner, who taught so many people too. And she said that was the neighborhood playhouse, I think, and that taught her how to act. Like her mom wanted her to be like a ballerina or singer, but she really wasn't. I think she went to Juilliard briefly for singing, maybe. But somebody I used to date, a woman, she had a friend whose son was under her wing, under Lee Grant's, and it sounded like she was a phenomenal teacher. But yeah, I guess there was very few actor studio teachers besides the Lee Strasberg, who was the head of that. And I think the first time he was sick, someone filled in for him, and that person actually kind of got ousted, according to a method actor studio book I have.
Is the actor studio in LA?
It's in New York,
Oh.
and then they had a West Coast version that got the approval of the New York with some of the same people. It was out here. It was Carl Malden, and I think Carl Malden wanted to keep it as its own entity. But Martin Landau, Jack Nicholson, Harry Dean Stanton, a ton of actors. That probably wait, who else? Tom Skerritt, Barbara Bain, maybe, because she was married to Martin Landau. Mark Rydell, he's a really good director, actor.
Is it still functioning? Still in operation?
Yeah, I have a friend who I don't know if he'd want me to say, but he's a really good actor, working actor. He's not very famous, but he's done a ton of good shows and movies over the years. And he told me he's probably like in his 70s now, and he was in New York. I mean, he's done stuff with real top people, but he auditions there all the time. He tells me, and they never give it to him, and they have their reasons. I had an acting teacher who was in the actor studio, and she taught me a lot of really good things and stuff that I could to brush up on when I go to an audition. I really should do. But I like what I sort of learned from her, from what she learned from them.
Mm-hmm.
I think she was in New York too. It's not easy to get in there, but I don't know how strong it's going. I met a girl who had been auditioning to get in there, and Mark Rydell was her teacher. She was in New York, because that's where she grew up. Lee Grant.
Okay. And the actor studio is like a school, kind of, that you have to get into?
You have to audition to get in. Okay. Yeah.
And then you
it's
learn and get better at your craft.
Yes. They tried to they put on like Hatful of Rain as one of their most famous pieces. The guys who wrote it, I think they went there. Like Uta Hagen had a school in New York. Herbert Berghoff is the name of the school. That's very similar, and it's some of the same people, I think. And then I had another teacher who had gone to the Herbert Berghoff. But yeah, it's very prestigious. It's the top, or was the top. I mean, there's differing opinions. You hear stories of really well-known actors not getting in, and then there's plenty of actors who didn't go to school who were really good. So there's a kind of elitism. maybe that's the wrong word. With some of the schools, but I mean they're super talented people. And then there's Stella Adler. I guess Mark Ruffalo is like one of the last more famous people that I know of who went through that school. But Robert De Niro was at Stella Adler. And Al Pacino and Lee Strasberg. That was one of the big things. But I think Brando and a lot of people were at a lot of those.
Okay.
Stella Adler and Actors Studio, Paul Newman. When you look at the list of people, that's why it gets it's it is elite because it's hard, and they're super talented people. And so it shaped filmmaking for sure.
So Lee Grant started out of there.
She was started with Meisner, and then so she got to teach at the Actors Studio.
Okay, got it.
So, but maybe she had to do the same thing there too. I don't know. Or maybe it's called monitoring because there, people who are in the Actors Studio will probably be like, "You're getting it all wrong."
The next scene, she's out of the courtroom. She goes to her office. We meet her secretary, Nancy, who looks amazing. She's wearing this black button-down shirt with a wide collar.
Yeah.
And a
She's got a tie.
Shiny white satin tie. I love it. And then she's wearing this super cute A-line skirt that's black with white outlines, white oval shaped outlines around the black. Very early 70s style, and it's just awesome.
So who is the costume person?
It was Burton Miller again, the same guy who did the first episode.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because you know what I did today? I rented a couple films with people who worked on these films.
Oh.
And one of them is Damien Omen 2, or Omen 2 Damien.
Yeah.
And he was the costume person on that. And you mentioned that last week. I can't wait to watch that because Lee Grant is also in that.
Oh, wow.
She's the lead with William Holden.
Wow.
So they're the parents of Damien, Satan. Or Lucifer. I'm not sure which.
Right. That's very cool.
Because supposedly they're different.
One thing about the costumes this time, I mean, they were all spectacular, but they were very subdued relative to the first episode. And I think that was, Burton Miller was responding to the set, to the storyline, which is like, what does a professional woman who's in court wear? She's not going to wear the really cool, fun dresses that we saw in the first episode with neon colors and feathers. She's going to be much darker colors. She wears browns and dark red, maroon and dark blue and stuff like that. But it was still really, the clothes were still nice. They just weren't quite as exciting. They didn't jump out as much as in the last episode.
Yeah, I thought what Lee Grant wore was really awesome. Really, I don't know, just really styling. Maybe it's just hard to not watch her.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's so smooth.
Yeah. So Nancy's desk is, the only thing I want to say is I love seeing the way people worked back then before we had laptops and everything. She does have a typewriter, but she mostly has pads of paper and a pencil and that's Nancy. And then Leslie, the lawyer, has papers and books, but she does have that big fancy phone, which we can talk about a little bit later. And in this scene, her phone rings and her friend calls Pat. Leslie had asked Pat to call her and just say the word tennis to remind her, but actually Leslie, in front of her associate, and I think I can't remember if there's someone else in the room, Nancy and her associate, she pretends that this is the ransom call. Yeah, that's this office scene. Is there anything else on that scene, Paul, that jumped out at you? Or
well, I just noticed that Nancy tried to get the phone before she did. Right. So I guess that's the instinct as a secretary, but usually you would let your boss get the phone, right?
Well, I think if you're trying to get the phone, if you're trying to answer phones for your boss.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
You want to be on it. Leslie intervenes, which is a clue.
Yeah, and that scene ends with this fade, with this blurry fade that they do throughout this show. Did you notice that?
Yes. Yeah, now that you remind me, yes, I remember.
Yeah, I think that's a special effect too. I don't think it was the camera operator, the director of photography, the cinematographer, Lionel Linden, but I could be wrong. But I feel like that it seems odd the way they do it, and it's consistent. I would find that unless they had that plan ahead of time, but I seriously doubt it. But I wanted to see the cameraman's other work. So he won an Oscar for Around the World in 80 Days, the
Ah,
Jules Verne book.
wow.
It was a movie with David Niven, Cantinflas, Shirley MacLaine, written by different writers, including S.J. Perlman, who was a good book writer that Woody Allen always talked about, and the Marx Brothers. He wrote the Marx Brothers movies. But the cameraman Lionel Linden, he won an Oscar for Around the World in 80 Days. He also did like the Manchurian Candidate.
Mm,
He did TV series Night Gallery that had a lot of the same actors that are in Columbo
wow.
and same directors and same a lot of crossover because it's Universal
Yeah.
was producing it. But I was wondering if he had done those flares right with the.
Yeah.
So I watched a movie he did a couple years before this called Pendulum with George Peppard. George Peppard plays a police captain accused of murdering his wife and the wife's lover. But I didn't see any stylistic stuff at all.
Yeah.
So it makes me think that it's this editor and the other editor, Edward M. Abrams. He went on to actually direct some of the Columbo episodes, as well as Ellery Queen and Murder, She Wrote.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but Pendulum, because I watched Pendulum, which Lionel Linden, the cameraman, he photographed that movie. It was a great movie. It was a really good movie. I recommend that. Pendulum.
Oh, I've never heard of it.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it either. But I didn't see anything that, in terms of camera work, that reminded me of this.
Yeah.
But sometimes a good movie, if it's really strong, that stuff doesn't stand out too much, and you're in for the ride. You're just really enjoying it. You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, this episode of Columbo really has that with the editing. Even though it does stand out, there are moments with the editing that I didn't notice until the second time around.
Yeah.
Really clever stuff, like the overlapping of audio, which Steven Soderbergh does a lot of that, where you hear dialogue from the next scene, but you're still in the other scene.
Ah.
Or there's a scene where as towards the end, Lee Grant is against the wall and she has an argument with the stepdaughter.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear the phone ring and she turns her head, and then it cuts to another scene where she's in her office and that's the phone ringing.
Oh.
So it's like this really clever edit
Wow.
that either Edward Abrams did or John Elias did. I'm not sure.
Wow. That's a good catch, Paul. I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. All right, so the next scene we finally meet Columbo. So she's back at her grand house. There's a whole bunch of dudes in there in suits working another reel to reel. So many reel to reels. And connecting it to her phone, and we see a quick flash to her home office phone setup. No, we see a quick flash to her office phone setup to kind of imply, like, foreshadowing, like, what's going to come. And then finally, at 12 minutes, 40 seconds into the episode, the doorbell rings and we meet Columbo. Leslie comes out to help Columbo look for a pen that he dropped somewhere off her front porch.
Yeah.
And she puts on her long, dark brown fur coat. I like this though because I feel like in the first Columbo, he's a little different. He's not quite as disheveled, as he is moving forward. But here we start to see, first thing off the bat, he's on her doorstep. He's lost something. We kind of get to see his method of how he sort of pushes the buttons of people around him. Kind of, I don't know, it's hard to know like how planful he was, but is he trying to see what kind of reactions he's going to get from her?
Yeah.
Oh, and in this scene, we also see Leslie Williams flirt a little bit with the FBI agent, and he starts to look a little bit uncomfortable when they're sitting on the sofa together, and she's like, "Tell me what the chances are. My husband's going to be okay." And she says something that makes him squirm a little bit, which she does a little later too, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, she's using all of her tools.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because she has them all like sink, line, and hook.
Totally.
Yeah, I like her reaction to Columbo about the pen. She's like, "Is that your pen? I can get a flashlight. You want a flashlight? You sure?" Yeah, she's all kind of like polite, and it feels like the person whose husband is kidnapped would be much more, "What? A pen? What?" Like,
yeah, right.
Like, like what is wrong? What's going on? Never mind. I'm at it. Like,
right.
But she's so like, "Oh, hello."
Yeah, she's so like put together. She's not at all thrown off or upset. She's just very calm, and that's why I was saying, like, I don't know if Columbo is doing this. This is how could he suspect off the bat? But if he did suspect her, this is a very good way to see, like, how is she truly feeling in this moment, you know? Like,
Yeah.
is she really upset, or is she gonna get a flashlight and help me dig around her bushes for a pen, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's always got to be, I would imagine, deaths by murder and ransom. Well, the ransom stuff, I don't know, but maybe because they're rich, maybe you're right. Maybe he's seen something nefarious between couples. Well, he'd probably seen it a lot.
Right.
And so that's just a little thing maybe for him, like, oh, let me just try this out.
Yes. Yeah.
Let me just start up, see who's there,
Totally.
if she answers the door. But it seems like maybe a cop would have answered the door. I don't know.
Yeah, you'd think. Oh, one thing I wanted to point out was that they've got the ransom letter, and he's looking at the envelope, and it was mailed with a 5-cent stamp.
Oh, was the address the same?
That's a good question. Probably, but that's so today's stamp is 55 cents, so that's 11 times.
Oh yeah. No, sorry, Liz. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, it's crazy. Okay, I can't see the 5 cent. Let me see. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
You see the address?
So yeah, see, and Paul Williams. It says 27 San Corona.
Oh no, they're on Bellagio.
Okay, so we should look up 27 San Corona and see what that is.
That's the fake address. The next scene is, let's see, she's in her home office, and she's got more dudes around her. The only costume comment I have is that her accountant, I'm guessing it's her accountant, is explaining to her, like, we had to take all this in order to pay this ransom that they're requesting. We had to draw all kinds of funds and sell stock, yada yada.
Yeah.
His clothing is very much like Dwight Schrute from The Office. It's like this brown suit with an orange shirt and a gold tie, which is the same color scheme that.
Really?
Yeah, it's like Dwight's signature color scheme.
Maybe they had, got inspiration from this.
Maybe, yeah.
Well, I want to say something before they go in there.
Oh, yeah.
When the guys are doing the tap into the phone,
Uh-huh.
the agents, I love when Columbo is like staring at them and they're staring back at him, and the guy named Hammond, played by Paul Carr, needs to get in there, but Columbo's right there, so he's like, "Excuse me." So Columbo gets out of the way, and he's still staring, and then Columbo's like, looks at him, he's like, "Fascinating," and then Hammond takes off the earpiece and just stares at him like, "What? What's wrong with you?" Like, it's so great because it's like there's already this sort of antagonistic kind of,
Yeah.
which I don't know if I've seen before in a Columbo. Do you recall that kind of?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Later on, we see him assert himself a little bit more, and I think, it's on the same way where he's just irritating them, but there are definitely moments in this series where he asserts himself and is not afraid to stake his claim, like.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it comes up, but it's not super common, right? Because he's always kind of sneaking up to the problem and not very obvious about it. But then when he needs to, he's more direct and assertive about things.
Oh, another a cool thing, Lee Grant, when Columbo is staring at them and she has a cup of tea and she's like sipping on the cup of tea, but she just holds it in front of her face. So good, because it's like she's like, this guy's for real. He doesn't trust what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that?
No.
She's like right behind the guys setting the tap, and she holds the cup of tea and she just keeps it in front of her face. And to me, it's so like she doesn't want to reveal anything. She doesn't know what to do, so she just keeps the cup in front of her face. I just felt like, wow, she's like totally guilty. Like.
Yeah.
I was really impressed with that because the camera shows everybody around the piano and she's listening to Columbo's questions, but she doesn't want to pay attention to him, even though she is. So she just zones out, pretending to keep herself warm and sip the tea. So it's really good acting, I thought. Really well done.
That's a good catch, Paul. I didn't even notice that. So back to this scene where they're talking about the money, and she's getting the money, and she's brought her own bag for the money, which is, red flag number 7 or whatever for this episode. And this bag, I was kind of Googling around about it, but it's like a classic white vinyl. They would call this like an airline flight bag, where lots of airlines would give these out to people, and it's like white, and then it has red piping all along the trim.
Yeah.
And a lot of airlines did this where it'd be like a solid color bag and then like a contrasting piping in a different color around the edges. And this style, this sort of vintage style, came back into fashion when I was in college, and I actually had one of those bags.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
but
weird.
it wasn't like an actual vintage, it was like a fake vintage, and it was like red vinyl with, I think it was gray piping, and it didn't have an airline logo, it had a Volkswagen logo on it. So it said VW on it, but it was the same sort of style of this airline flight bag.
Oh, wow. So and that was that. So that was like an ad also for Volkswagen.
Yeah, I mean, I paid for the bag, somebody made it and
Oh,
was selling it. It wasn't actually like a Volkswagen giveaway.
oh, okay.
But it was in the style of these kind of giveaway type bags.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what happened to it. I think I must have given it away eventually. Oh, and I looked on Etsy. If you want that flight bag, Paul, you can get it on Etsy, a vintage version for about $65.
Does it say the one in Colombo, or just says the one that flight people use?
No, yeah, it's just like the same style, but it doesn't reference Colombo, unfortunately. Uh,
All right. So what's next, Liz?
Okay, next they're at the airport and they're getting ready to do this elaborate, I mean, honestly, ridiculous handoff of money. Like it doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, I hate to go to Colombo for like amazing plot lines because I just feel like that's not the point of the show. That's not the joy that I get out of it. I mean,
Yeah.
there are cool twists and turns, but like there's a lot more that's exciting.
Yeah.
But this whole setup, so the setup is, so someone's got her husband. They've sent her a ransom letter with an aerial map telling her you're going to see a beacon when you're flying over the dark night sky. You're going to see a beacon of light, and that's where you drop the bag of money. But it's just ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
how would you know where a bag of money is going to land in reference to a beacon of light down, I don't know, maybe in a desert? It's easier that you could,
Yeah.
the supposed kidnappers could see the bag falling from the sky and like drive to it. But it just,
Well, didn't they give the coordinates?
yeah, they gave the coordinates, but still, like, I mean, that's got to be a massive, what do you call that? Like a confidence interval or whatever. Like, you have coordinates, but how do you know that your bag's going to actually land?
Oh, right.
Like, how close is the bag going to land to those coordinates?
Yeah. Wasn't it supposed to have the beacon on it, the light?
I thought the beacon was down below.
Oh.
So she was supposed to look for the beacon, and then when she sees the beacon, she's supposed to drop the bag.
Oh, so she just put the beacon in the. Gotcha. Yeah, that makes. Yeah, well,
Yes.
that was the trick. Like.
Right.
Yeah, how could you actually see the beacon? Yeah.
I mean, she might be able to see the beacon, but how could she make sure her bag gets near the beacon?
Yeah. Yeah, that's ridiculous.
It's pretty crazy. But anyhow,
Sorry, William and Richard.
doesn't mean I don't love the show. This part was a little crazy. But I do want to say that she looks pretty fabulous. She changes into her flying clothes.
Yeah, little head thing.
Yeah, her little scarf and long white jacket with metal gloves.
I was gonna say when she switches out the bag in the locker, the music, they do this little 5-second tune is great. Like it's just so magical. I didn't notice the first time around, but the second time I watched it, I just got caught up in the music. I was like, man, that was great. It's real brief, and it seems to continue, but the helicopter sounds are so loud, you hear more of that.
Yeah. Yeah, the music is so good in this episode. I noticed that, like, when I think about my favorite Columbos and versus the ones that I don't really enjoy, there's just a couple that I don't really enjoy. The music is so important in sort of creating the feeling and pulling me in and, moving the whole imagery forward and moving the whole story along. And I think they did a really good job of the music in this one.
Yeah, Billy Goldenberg.
Okay, so there's some there's a little bit of humor here because Columbo has to ride in a helicopter and he's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I don't know, is there anything else you want to say about the air flying scene, Paul?
I like that you could hear them talk through the headphones. And I like the way when they were getting in and the helicopter started and the way it was cut, it was really, to me, it reminded me of how strong films are now in general, like the way that when they show like real stuff happening, the way, say, military or in the offices of the CIA, or when there's sort of like the movie Sicario, if they show you what goes on behind the scenes or they're revving up to do something, it had that feel which really stood out. Like it didn't seem like a Columbo, like it was like a modern movie from 2020 or something. Briefly,
Mm-hmm.
with the helicopter starting up, the way they cut to the propeller, and then them putting on the headphones, and then really well done. I like that little section.
Definitely. Yeah, I was thinking that, all of this airport scenes and the footage they took from a airplane, like they had a bigger budget maybe for this one. They had spent some money on this episode, filming this episode maybe. I don't know. That's just the feeling I got. Okay, so Leslie, the drop is done. Columbo's feeling like something is off and he wanders the airport. Leslie goes home back to Casa Encantada, to her beautiful room, which has 3 chandeliers in her bedroom, fireplace, the fire going in it, closet, walk-in closet that has a back door to another closet, her fur closet. This is where she keeps her furs. And that closet has a secret compartment where she hides her bag. And I love a good secret compartment. I mean, every home needs one, really, when you think about it.
Yeah, we don't have one. We should get one.
Yeah,
The fireplaces, it's like in the beginning, they're pretty perfect. And if you remember, like after she dumps her husband's body, she has a fireplace in the study, and that fire is going too.
oh my gosh, she's so spoiled.
And so like the fire was going when she killed her husband, and she just let it go, I guess. She came back, and she had the wherewithal to do another fire in the study. It's like,
Wow.
pretty amazing. Fireplace in every room.
What a life. What a life. So we meet Margaret, her stepdaughter, in this scene, who's come home, unbeknownst to Leslie. And I gotta say that Margaret is real spoiled, real snotty, and it's hard to have any sympathy for her in this episode. She's kind of a little bit one-dimensional, maybe. I don't know.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. I just felt like I just kind of couldn't stand her.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe that's part of what you're saying. Part of the point of her being snotty. But I kind of liked her. I mean, I liked her. I felt like she didn't like her stepmom at all, and she kind of like saw through it.
Yeah, that's true.
And so she's pissed off, and so it just starts from the get go. Yeah, Patricia Maddock plays the stepdaughter, Margaret Williams. She was in, before this, or the same year, she was in Beguiled, Clint Eastwood movie with Geraldine Page and a bunch of other great actresses and Clint Eastwood. That's a great film. Don Siegel, who I thought was a really good director. He did a lot of Clint Eastwood stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Sofia Coppola redid it.
Oh.
I think she won something for that.
Cool.
Yeah, Patricia Maddock is in that. I'm curious to see her other work because she reminds me of a lot of young performers during that time. But I thought she was good. I thought she held up. You weren't feeling anything, huh?
Well, I mean, and I don't know. I guess maybe just she was doing a good job of acting, and I just did not like the character that she was portraying.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I hear you. Oh, okay. I see. Maybe you've met people like that at school or something.
Maybe. I mean, no one jumps to mind, thankfully, but yeah.
What about not a cathedral in El Paso?
You mean Loretto?
Or Loretto? that was our brother. Yeah.
No, they're probably some classmates that had a little bit of that attitude, but I don't know.
She passed away in where our parents met in Florida.
Tallahassee?
In Tallahassee, yeah, I think she passed away there.
Hmm.
But I was very curious to see her work because she's a very attractive young woman. She's not like a model, but of the time they did hire people a little more on performance, I think, than they do now in some ways. Yeah. And so I really wanted to see what else she had done and what else she might be like. She has the same exact glasses in The Beguiled, so...
Oh, interesting.
And she was in an episode of Mannix, which the writers of this, the original creators, William Link and Richard Levinson, they created Mannix, but I don't think they were fans of how Mannix turned out. I think Mannix was a little more violent than they wanted.
I don't know that. It's another TV series? I don't know that one.
Yeah, I believe he's a cop.
Okay. The next morning, Leslie and Margaret have a quick exchange while Margaret watches Double Indemnity.
Yeah.
1944 film. I looked at it briefly. I didn't recognize anyone in that one. Any actors in that movie. But if anyone wants to watch what it was that Margaret was watching, it was, it's what she's seeing is paralleling what's happening in her real life, which is kind of cool. So the double indemnity scene that we see is a woman talking to a man about killing her husband and, making it look like she didn't kill her husband so she can get a whole bunch of money, basically.
Yeah, it's a very famous film.
Oh.
They show that in other movies. That like I want to say Manhattan Murder Mystery
Okay.
showed that, but the guy is Fred Murray, isn't that his name?
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, Fred McMurray and Barbara Stanwyck, who Barbara Stanwyck was huge. I have a book of hers that our dear friend Katie Custer gave us about her. It's like volume 2, Barbara Stanwyck.
Oh wow.
So yeah, Barbara Stanwyck is the one who wants to get her husband killed. Yeah, and that's Fred McMurray that you see.
Oh, okay.
In Columbo. Yeah, Fred McMurray. He was the dad in I think Our Three Sons, right?
I don't know. I didn't recognize the name.
My Three Sons. Yeah, that's right. He was the dad in My Three Sons, which was a huge show from 1960 to 1972.
Oh wow, that's a long run.
See, Liz, if you were born in the 60s, you would know this.
I know. What's wrong with me? Too young.
You grew up on Dynamite and the magazine Bananas. So
I know.
you
I know.
don't know about My Three Sons.
It's all my fault. Should have been born earlier. Okay, let's move along here. So, courthouse scene. Leslie's wearing a fur coat. She gets the bad news about her husband and she pretends to faint. Columbo is suspicious. But, the scene, he's like, why does she fall apart? She's so calm all the time. In this moment, when she gets the news, she falls apart. But I do want to say that this makes me think of one of my favorite podcasts, which is My Favorite Murder, where they talk about true crime. And what they talk about when they kind of review cases is that it's really hard to know how someone's going to react when they get really bad news, because sometimes people react a way that you don't expect.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you suspect them of something. But actually, I think one of the points that they make is that it's really hard to tell how somebody, there isn't one right way to react when you get really bad news, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine Richard Levinson, William Link, I say imagine, I don't know. These guys, they read Ellery Queen, so they were book readers, right?
Mm-hmm.
They love books. I'm not saying they didn't hang out with real lieutenants and captains, because they may have had some friends. But then that would help them, like if they had done that.
Yeah.
And inform them as writers, just as an actor would spend time with, not necessarily, right? Like,
right.
Did Peter Falk hang out with a real lieutenant? I doubt it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's a good point. I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on, she's at her next scene. She's back at her beautiful home. Lots of people around to comfort her. Leslie, after everyone leaves, Leslie's kind of like dancing around a little bit. She doesn't seem upset at all, and Margaret notices that. Margaret peers over the railing of the staircase and kind of sees Leslie in the living room, not looking at all sad. And then we go to the graveyard scene where they're burying Paul Williams. Margaret and Leslie are the grieving family. And after the ceremony, Margaret slaps Leslie, which is just I think this is one of the moments where I'm just like, I cannot stand this person.
Because she slapped the lady she thought killed her mom?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I don't know, maybe I would do the same thing. But it feels like Margaret doesn't know in that moment how awful Leslie is. She just thinks, she doesn't know that Leslie.
But she does, Liz. She does.
I don't know.
She's a little Columbo.
Maybe.
She had her number all along. Remember, because her father told her, remember?
That's true.
We find out later.
But how does she, yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're right. But she doesn't go.
Look, Liz, you're just being prejudiced, okay? You can't put her in jail because you think she's
I'm not
bad.
trying to put Margaret in jail. I'm just saying she's annoying. She's annoying. She's annoying. And Columbo reaches out to her. He's like, if you ever need anything, I'm here for you.
Yeah, I loved her little dance. I love when she puts her hands in her face or something and she looks at that mirror, that huge, weird, gold traced mirror over the fireplace. Yeah, and then she does the little dance. Like, yeah, that's so, like, weird and cool.
And that, yeah.
Maybe not
And
cool,
she
but
throws away she burns the sleeping pills, and
yeah, she throws them in there really quick.
she's like, I don't need these. My life is great now. Little suspicious. Okay, so
Yeah, she just punches her, huh?
yeah, she's she's brutal. Okay, so after the funeral, we go back to the mansion again. Leslie's friends are telling her to kick Margaret out. Margaret's calling her mother dear. Mother dear. Yes, mother dear.
That's the one who tells her to like cut her off. That's Jean Jean Byron, and she was a big actress
Mm.
for a long time. I had a feeling something about her because she delivered her
Yeah,
two lines really well and interesting, but almost like pay attention to me,
yeah.
It fit the character perfectly. But yeah, she'd been doing stuff since, let's see, 1952.
Wow, yeah. That's
She's
impressive.
she did a lot of work for a long time.
If I were you, I would throw her out on the street right away.
I want some friends like that,
Oh, no. I don't think so. As much as I don't like Margaret, that's yeah. Okay, so moving on now. The funeral's over. Leslie's back at work the next day. Columbo shows up with with a sexist comment. And he doesn't have a ton of sexist comments, but he does make a comment to the secretary. It's her associate who's a male who's filling in for Nancy, the secretary. And Columbo says, I don't know how you do it. And the associate's like, do what? And he's like, work for a woman.
Oh, is that what he says?
Yeah. And the guy's like, well, she's one of the best lawyers in the city. So,
Oh, shoot.
yeah. So, every now and then a little something like that comes out of him.
Yeah.
This is where we get a good close view of her fancy phone machine that helps set up the fake phone call from Paul Williams that
Hmm.
the FBI all heard. So everyone was like, oh, he's still alive. He's telling her, he's giving her instructions or whatever. Anyhow, I went down a small deep dive of the rabbit hole on the internet of trying to figure out what was the phone.
Hmm.
I couldn't find it. But it had this cool like little plastic cards that had holes punched into them that you would slip into the phone, and then that would trigger a message to play at a certain time,
Yeah.
which was cool.
But you couldn't find any?
I couldn't find there were things I saw. There's like a Coda phone and an Isa phone, but I couldn't find that exact phone on the internet.
Maybe it was fictional.
Maybe they made it up.
Or maybe it was like a beta,
Yeah, totally. Only 3 made or something. So Columbo's there. He wants to pick Leslie's brain, find out more about Paul, try to look at this murder from a different point of view. And so she's like, all right, let's go fly in an airplane. So they do. They're back in the plane. Leslie's back in her stellar flying outfit. Columbo's feeling nauseous and nervous again. And they're flying over the Tehachapi Mountains, which is a really pretty area. I've never been to it, but I was looking at it online. It's like between Los Angeles and Bakersfield, kind of off to the east towards the Sierra Nevadas.
I think we've driven through there before. Yeah.
Yeah, you probably have. You can hike there. There's a winery. There's like an alpaca farm. There's a bunch of wind turbines there that you might be able to see the wind turbines if you're driving down the I-5 or driving up the I-5. Okay, let's move on to the next scene. Barney's Beanery. What? All right, Paul. So the next scene is at Barney's Beanery, and I understand that you have a special connection to this place.
Yeah, actually, I couldn't wait because I was waiting to eat the chili, but it's gotten a little cold, but it's still good. I got some Barney's Beanery chili today, and I talked to the owner. St. John my wife was going to take his picture, but we just talked to him for a minute with, even we had to keep our distance and all that. But he said, because Columbo has the chili.
Oh, yeah.
But I can't have any chili with wheat in it, which bums me out because the crackers would be so good.
Yeah.
But this is the vegetarian chili, and it's really good. Put some sour cream in it.
Nice.
Well, Columbo puts pepper. But the owner said, yeah. He said, oh, yeah. He's like, yeah, they did the pilot here. He said, but this guy has been there for 18 years. So he hasn't been there since, this.
Mm-hmm.
But he said the rest of it is in the studio. So all the other episodes that have Barney's Beanery, it's in the studio.
Oh.
Yeah,
Interesting.
but maybe they ordered chili from there. Hopefully.
So it looks kind of a divey place. Was that the feel that you got from going there, or is it a little nicer now?
Oh yeah, they've redone the front. They redid the windows. It's not divey like the wood being all chipped. It's all, a lot of brick there now. It's still a lot of stuff to choose from, and it's very reasonable in price. And so where Columbo sits down at the bar there,
Uh-huh.
when I first went there like 8 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. Well, yeah, would have been 10 years ago. I sat where those two women are. Do you remember those two women behind him?
Are they in a booth or something behind him?
They're by the windows.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a woman smoking a cigarette
Mm-hmm.
that we see at one point, and then behind him there's some tables that are along the windows. So he's at the bar, like at
Yeah.
by the cash register.
Right.
So where there's these two women, that's where I originally sat with some coworkers from over 10 years ago. That's the only other time I'd been there since today.
Wow.
But it was great. The owner came out the side. There was a line of people waiting to get food and drinks, and they actually were doing drinks too. You could get a cocktail for like $10.
Wow. To go? To go cocktail?
Yeah, right there while you waited for your food. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, the lady was awesome. She took our order over the phone, and then the owner came out the side. I don't know how he knew we were on the side. It was really strange because there was a line of people.
Yeah.
But he knew when to come out because he came out. There was one customer in particular who was fretting over stuff. He came out right when that person started to fret. You could tell. He has a sixth sense, that owner. So, but yeah, the chili's pretty good. So are you eating some chili too?
Yeah, so I ate most of it. I have like a spoonful left in my bowl. But I made a chili the other night. It's vegan because the kids and Elliot are vegan and I'm, vegetarian. But I cooked black beans and kidney beans from scratch. So I soaked them overnight and then I put them in the pressure cooker with like a whole chopped onion, a can of crushed tomatoes, bay leaves, chopped celery, a whole bunch of spices, and then some of that veggie meat. It's called texturized vegetable protein. It's like these little dried granules that give it more of a meaty texture. And then I just cooked all that together in the crock pot for like maybe 45 minutes or something, and it turned out pretty good. And I made cornbread. I made a vegan cornbread.
Ooh.
Yeah, and everyone loved it. Yeah, so I have some chili too, but it's not from Barney's. Do they still have that orange and red, very vintage looking sign out front?
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Very cool.
I took some pictures.
Yay! I want to see them. One thing I wanted to say about this scene, and you probably know this, but Bert, I don't know if he's the owner or whatever in the episode, but Bert is working at the beanery. He's played by Timothy Carey, and he actually plays Bert twice in Across Columbo's, and then he plays a character named Tony once in a Columbo. But this is the only time he plays Bert working at Barney's beanery.
Oh.
And maybe this is what the owner was referencing, but the second time he plays Bert, it's a very different setup. It's like his own much smaller chili house. And then when he appears as Tony in an episode with William Shatner, which we'll get to, his name is Tony, and it's Tony's Deli or something like that. And it's a different look. It looks like a fancier sandwich place.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but Timothy Carey did some work with Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah, I've seen both of those.
Nice. Yeah, the pictures of him, in this episode, he's just like a normal dude, normal waiter or whatever, cook, I guess is the best description. But when you see the pictures of him where I guess he was working with in Stanley Kubrick films or something, he looks kind of crazy. I didn't realize that about him, that he was such a big name.
Yeah, I didn't know. I recognized him, and I'd seen him in Cassavetes movies, John Cassavetes.
Uh-huh.
Which we'll have a special episode for that one.
Yes.
But John Cassavetes was good friends with Peter Falk, and in two of Cassavetes' films, Timothy Carey is in them, in The Killing of a Chinese Bookie, Minnie and Moskowitz, and he's probably in some other ones. But yeah, The Killing and Paths of Glory, Stanley Kubrick, are very good films. The Killing is wonderful. Jim Thompson, the book writer, did the dialogue. But yeah, I like both of those films. They've been around for a while. And Kubrick's wife is in Paths of Glory. She's the singer at the bar. She's still alive.
Okay. Wow.
But yeah, Bert the cook, he was interesting because he kind of gets in there close to Columbo, and he says, why do you read the menu? You know what you're going to order. Why do you do that?
Yeah.
You know what? That's a good point. Why do I do that?
Yeah.
Columbo said, because I won't be disappointed if I just order the same thing.
Yeah. I know that feeling, man. That's why I rewatch The Office or Columbo. Like, you know, you're not going to be disappointed if you just do the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's been my problem with a lot of stuff over the years, even with music.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't get out a lot to scenes like you and your husband Elliot, which I regret. Although St. John and I now kind of get out, my wife, we get out a little bit to stuff that we're like, oh, maybe we should go see this person as they're not very well known. But with film and television, I totally understand it, and it's weird, sort of like Achilles' heel, because yeah, when you spend the time and you're like, I hate stopping a film. And when I was growing up, going to the movie theater was very rare if I ever left. There was only one film that
you walked out on?
well, there was two films.
Two?
Yeah, there was two films. One was Death Ship with George Kennedy, but I was a kid and I was scared out of my life. and our dad, I wanted to see it, but we were in what was formerly known as Yugoslavia. We were in an outdoor theater. Were you there?
If I was tiny.
Yeah, you were tiny. But that movie scared the crap out of me, and my legs were popping up and down. I was so scared.
Aw, poor little Paul.
Yeah, I was trying to pull our dad out of there, and he finally was like, "Okay, we'll go." But I had to convince him. Like it was so weird. I was so scared.
Aw.
And then there was another movie which I won't mention because I'd like to see it again just to see how I feel because of the director.
Yeah.
The director did really well at a festival, and he made one Hollywood film, and it crashed and burned, and I always wondered what happened.
Yeah. We won't mention him in case he's listening.
Yeah.
He's probably listening.
Yeah. he's not listening to this.
Well, you never know, Paul. Never know.
That's true. But now with video, I'll project the movies if I can, and if I'm not feeling it, I'll stop it, and I kind of feel bad because you never know what about the actors or the music or something that's going to change that'll lighten things. And plus, I paid for the rental or the SVOD. Yeah, you can't get that time back, right?
Yeah.
And it's lame when you like I sat through this and
yeah, that's no fun.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to say back to when he gets off the plane. I love this dialogue.
Oh yeah, about Ralph.
They get off the plane and he says, she scares the crap out of him in the plane, and he gets out and he's holding his hand on the wing, sort of catching his breath somewhat. But in the plane, she told him, he said, "Did your husband have any personal enemies?" And she says, "Everyone admired my husband. He was the president of the local bar association for 5 consecutive years." And then he said, "But he said, behind the applause, there might be someone who's envious, someone who resents all that success." And she says, "Well, if there was such a person, I never met him."
Yes.
And she's got this great look. So it had to be a male, of course, right?
Right.
And so after they stop, they get land back on the ground, and he comes out, and it's this awesome dialogue, and the acting between the two of them is great. She's walking away. She's ready to get rid of him. "I'm done. We're done talking." She's like, "Great, see you later." And he's like, "Say, I have this cousin Ralph. His name is Ralph."
Yeah.
Ralph was the greatest at everything. He thought better, he talked better, he made out better. And then he gets really close to her, and she's still walking away. He gets like inches from her face. He's like, "Ralph was the greatest, boy." And then her look at him is like, I wrote, Lee's Grant look is so amazing. Like, you can tell she's like, what is he trying to pull? Because she's like, she feels like he's getting into her.
Yeah.
And he's like, "That Ralph was something. I'll tell you that. I'll never forget him." And she goes, "Is there a point to the story, Lieutenant?" And he's like, pauses, "A point?" And he's like, "Well, when you talked about your husband on the plane, well, it reminded me of Ralph. You see, Ralph was a bore. He was so perfect, There were times when I felt like killing him." Yeah. And then that's when he's the jugular. He's like, that's where he tries to plant it to see how she reacts. And she goes, and she pauses, looking at him. "Yes, well, now, Lieutenant, I have to change now."
Yeah. Yeah.
So she gets it, and she's like, "See you later." But I love that. Like, I love that there was this great moments of tension a little bit.
Yeah, totally.
It wasn't like Daniel Day-Lewis in My Left Foot with his publishing friend, and he's drunk, but it was still good. It was still some great looks internal stuff going on between them.
Yeah, that's a really good scene. Yeah, I'm glad you backed us up to that because that was like, I love it. He's like, I have this cousin Ralph. His name is Ralph. And then all the other stuff too. It's like really good. Well, we're almost at the end here. Okay, so
That's right.
Barney's Beanery, Columbo orders the chili again. Margaret walks in, and Columbo is he seems a little bit reluctant to talk to her at first, but then she's like, look, I think she did it. She didn't love my dad. And he plants a couple little seeds in Margaret
Mm-hmm.
and sort of starts kind of recruiting her to his side, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
which is going to be Leslie's downfall in the end.
Yeah.
So the next scene is back at the mansion, Casa Encantada, and Leslie's having a nap on the sofa. Columbo comes over because Margaret has called him, and Margaret has tried to frame her mother and her stepmom with a set of fake keys, because that was one of the clues that Columbo kind of planted in Margaret's head, was that we can't find your dad's keys, and when we find your dad's keys, that might help us figure out who the murderer is.
Yeah.
And so Margaret plants a fake set of keys that look like her dad's on Leslie. This is one of the scenes where, again, Margaret really irks me. She tries to slap Columbo.
She goes crazy.
She
Yeah.
goes crazy. She just is so like spoiled in this moment. Like, I want my way right now. Give it to me now. And she's like, she's a teenager or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so she tries to slap Columbo. It's a little bit awkward in terms of the acting. Like, she probably didn't quite,
With her?
just in terms of like where her arm goes, like the stunt work there is a little bit awkward.
Yeah.
It reminds me, another podcast I love is The Office Ladies, where two of the actors from The Office talk about
Mm-hmm.
their experience, Angela Kinsey and Jenna Fisher. And Angela Kinsey has this scene with Dwight Schrute, who's played by Rainn Wilson, where she has to slap him. And she said it took like, I don't know, like 13 takes and he was like, just go for it. You're not going to hurt me. So she's like really slapping him across the face like 13 times.
Oh, wow.
But I imagine in this episode in Columbo, maybe Margaret and Columbo didn't quite have that bond where he was like, just hit me as hard as you can across the face, So she's like aiming for his face, but really her arm is like more like arm to neck kind of contact. And he catches it, so there's no slap.
Yeah. Well, that's the real person, right? So when I saw that, I didn't think what you just said. I just thought she was going to hit him, and she kind of did. And so in real life, that person could do that.
That's true.
Like they trust him. That's why she went to meet him at the Barney's Beanery. But here she is. She's so, why isn't he going along with it? But I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I thought it was a very interesting scene.
Yeah.
Because I love how mad he got at her, like in terms of character. I don't recall that in too many of the episodes at all.
Yeah, not at all. It's kind of rare.
And his reaction to her and his sort of scolding of planting false evidence and all that.
Oh, in this scene also, Leslie and Margaret have a little showdown that I think we both sort of referenced already.
Yeah.
It's really good. That's a really great scene. Like, Leslie's and Margaret's mad, and Leslie keeps her cool and is just like tough as nails with Margaret, and Margaret is like a little bit shaken, and it's a little bit like I don't know, a little bit ugly, just like you just kind of feel the intensity, but it's really, really good.
Yeah.
Like, really well done. We're almost at the end here. Just a couple other scenes. So Columbo goes to, the next scene is back at Leslie's office, and Columbo sets up this kind of trick with her phone to demonstrate that he's kind of on to her technology, like how she might have used the technology to create the fake phone call. And then Leslie's like, Columbo, you act like you're so absent-minded and clueless, but it's all just for show, and you're really like devious and kind of suspicious of me. And he's like, yeah, well, I'm off the case, and I'm just here to say goodbye, basically. So then we have another scene at the house where Margaret terrorizes Leslie
Pretty fun.
Oh my gosh, it's a little wild. So Margaret is like trying to push Leslie over the brink here. Margaret points a gun at her and fires it twice, but I guess it's just blanks. And then
Yeah.
she's set up.
But she says that the next one could be real.
That's right. Oh. And then she sets up a beacon, like the beacon that Leslie used during the drop of the money when she was flying her plane. Margaret sets up a beacon to startle Leslie in her bedroom, and she puts like ransom letters across Margaret's bedroom mirror. She convinces Leslie that she wants money and that she's here to negotiate, and so Leslie promises her a whole bunch of cash for her to just go away and get out of her hair. And then the final scene, I don't know, Paul, is there anything else about that scene before we move on that you wanted to add?
No, yeah, those were really good scenes, like a horror movie.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's about it.
totally.
Very
Yeah,
entertaining.
yeah, it was good. In the final scene, we see Leslie taking Margaret to the airport with a briefcase full of cash. Margaret's like, goodbye, goodbye, Leslie.
We'll both have money and be fine.
That's right. And Leslie watches Margaret get on the plane, and then she bumps into Columbo, and she's surprised. She's like, "Oh, hello, Columbo. What's up?" She's like oblivious. She doesn't suspect Columbo at all, and she offers to buy Columbo a drink. And so they go to the airport lounge, and this is where Columbo lays out his victory to her. One of my favorite lines is like, "Mrs. Williams, you have no conscience.
Yeah.
You thought that Margaret could be bought." And he explains how, he convinced Margaret that the only way to catch Leslie would be to get Leslie to use the ransom money, which she had hidden in her secret compartment inside her fur coat closet. And so Margaret's able to get her to use the money. It's kind of a nice moment because Leslie says to Columbo, like, "You're very lucky." When she realizes she's been caught, she's like, "You're very lucky." And she's like, "Actually, no, you're very smart." And he's like, "You're smart too." And then a little bit of comedy at the end. The waitress, so Leslie gets, escorted out by two police officers, and Columbo's at the table at the airport lounge with a briefcase open full of $100 bills, just like stacks and stacks of cash. And the waitress comes around and is like over his shoulder, seeing the money, and she's like, "It's $1.10." And he's like, "Can I sign for it?" Like, he has no money, but she's very gracious. She's like, "Sure."
And he has no pen.
He has no pen. He has no money.
He says she gives him the pen.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, I like those lines too, where he's like, where he says what you said, and he says, "Did it ever occur to you that very few people would do what you did?"
Yeah.
And she doesn't think so. She thinks anybody would do that because she has no conscience.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to go ahead.
She doesn't get it. She's just like clueless.
I dare say that I think there's people like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they behave the way they do. Well, a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Who am I kidding, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, just histories and yeah. At the very end, I don't know if you notice this, but there's an announcement. It says, Dr. Paul Bailey, please report to the ticket booth," or something like that.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
And so I was thinking, like, that's kind of strange. Like, it felt odd a little bit.
Yeah.
I didn't think of it the first time. The second time, now I'm always, I'm paying more attention. So I was thinking, now this is a guess, but because they don't say anything else in terms of the overhead, maybe I'll have to listen again. But I Googled it just to see, because you will find all kinds of really strange theories and interesting things that kind of make sense sometimes. And so with that one, there was a show. So Dr. Paul Bailey, I found somebody's website. It's an older website, and he or she, whoever writes it, does like stuff about radio shows and television shows, since the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
They have a ton of stuff on there. And there was a TV show called Dr. Kildare. Dr. Kildare was a radio show before it was a TV show. But on the TV show, both William Link and Richard Levinson, the Columbo creators who were involved in all the shows and all the episodes and also wrote a lot of them, they wrote on this show, Dr. Kildare. They wrote on the television show. But before that, one of the radio show episodes of Dr. Kildare was an episode on the radio of Dr. Kildare called Paul Bailey Intern. And so I listened to that today, and Paul Bailey Intern, the radio show, Dr. Kildare, it's about, so Dr. Kildare is the main character. In the TV show is Richard Chamberlain. So it's just like he's a doctor and he helps people out. And this particular episode on the radio was this intern, Paul Bailey, and the doctor's Dr. Kildare, and he has got a co-star, another doctor. I forget what happens, but they find this intern, Paul Bailey, who's interning to be a doctor, smells like booze, and I think he's asleep or something, and they're like, "Why are you asleep?" I forget. He gets in trouble because they think he's drunk, right? In reality, what it was is he's been studying so hard as an intern that he's losing sleep, and his landlady gave him a drink. She's Irish, he's Irish, and to wake him up to get to work. So it was just something to wake him up. But you find out in the end that his brother died, and he always felt guilty because I think they were somewhere where it was an accident. It wasn't intentional, and he couldn't save his brother. So he always wanted to become a doctor, this Paul Bailey.
Mm-hmm.
And so within the whole episode it's called Paul Bailey, the name of that episode for Dr. Kildare, it's Paul Bailey finding the strength and these doctors showing them that he will become a doctor. And so at the very end, he decides, even though he's almost going to go back home and quit becoming a doctor completely, there's some other story sidelines like his father was a failure, so he's going to be a failure. Everybody in town said he wouldn't amount to being anything, especially a doctor. So to me, I feel that William Link and Richard Levinson heard that radio show, Dr. Kildare, because they ended up writing for it. But maybe they heard that episode and now they're saying Dr. Paul Bailey became that doctor. So I don't know. I know it's kind of silly, but
no.
I feel like there's like a little connection there.
Totally. It's probably not random, right? I mean.
Yeah. I mean, because in the first episode, when they go to the hospital, there's a lot of different doctors they say over the announcement. And there's no Paul Bailey, but they just say random names. And then one of the names is, of course, the doctor that Gene Barry wants to talk to that doctor who's watching his wife in Prescription for Murder. So yeah, I felt like that was like a weird sort of nod to that episode. But who knows? William Link's still alive. We could ask him.
Let's ask him. Get him on here.
Ask his agent.
Get him on the next one. Yeah, that's cool. Very cool. Well, Paul, should we wrap up with our overall rating for this episode?
Yeah, I think we should.
I can start. I think that this is a pretty good Columbo. It's not one of my absolute favorite Columbos, but I think it's pretty good in terms of, the acting is amazing. The set of the house is amazing. The storyline's pretty good. I think I would give this one like a 7.5 out of 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can't remember what I gave the last one, but maybe the same thing. Yeah, maybe because I hadn't seen Columbo in a long time. It was so fun to watch it. This one, I loved that he went to Barney's Beanery, not just because we could go there and I can get chili, but I loved that he was playing pool and he knocked the white ball in there. That he was like, he didn't show his cards to the girl, so that was fun to watch. Is different. The airplane ride when she's flying him around and he's feeling kind of sick. I like that she was in control and sort of controlling things. But at the same time, I thought Peter Falk was, he did good, but it's something about the scene. I guess they had to keep it where she really wouldn't threaten him, or else, how would Columbo really react to that? Would he say, okay, we got to really take this crazy nut down? So they had to keep it sort of in the middle, but that was kind of a long scene, I felt, with a lot of aerial shots, which I thought were good. But yeah, maybe I would give it the same rating, like a 7.5. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
The acting was really good. Lee Grant.
Yeah, she was great.
Yeah. Even at the end there, when she says, no, you're smart, not just lucky. And she gets up and he's like, would you like to finish your sherry? And she's like, no, I don't want it, And the way she gets up, her eyes, I feel like she's really about to cry a little bit here and a couple of the takes on her.
Mm-hmm.
When she gets up, I like that.
Yeah.
It kind of different from who that kind of person would be. I feel like that person would be like more scary, and like just more or less feeling. But she's such a good actress that she really made this character real.
Yeah.
She thought she'd get away with it. Interesting thing about Lee Grant, I saw that interview with her with Barbara Koppel. So it was her mom and her aunt that kind of raised her. I felt like in the interview she was saying, and they would have kitchen conversations. Her mom and her aunt. Her mom was from Russia. They were Jewish, and they would say. She said these would be kitchen conversations. They'd be like, you could marry one of these rich guys. There would be guys from Harvard in the area where they lived, or very successful. And she's like, and then if they could die, you would get their money. And they actually said this to her, like in the kitchen, like this is stuff she heard as a young girl.
That's crazy.
And to her, she was kind of like, I mean, her mother and her aunt were real performers, and she had some interesting stories, and she could really characterize them and perform as them on the interview. So it's interesting because that's not who she is, and as a person. So she sort of built this really interesting character. And one thing I meant to say is that she was blacklisted for a long time, over 10 years, during the McCarthy era.
Wow.
She couldn't get work.
Yeah, that's wild.
That's a long time. And she won the Best Actress at Cannes Film Festival.
Wow.
Right after she became blacklisted. But she said, she has an autobiography out, and she said that's where she really learned a lot when having to deal with that. She said it was a good thing. It really made her having to deal with that. I think because she spoke out against McCarthy and what was going on. She wasn't into Lenin and Trotsky. She wasn't into these, this sort of theory of everything has to be one way in terms of living, a certain doctrine. I think her first husband, I think she had a couple husbands, ran into the same trouble. And so she became friends with a lot of people who were blacklisted, like Zero Mostel, who's a real famous comedian who was in the movie The Producers with Gene Wilder, Mel Brooks film. But yeah, no, she's a very interesting performer, director. I really I want to see more of her stuff.
Yeah, she was great. She was really good. Okay, do you want to give me a little true-false quiz here, Paul?
Yeah, let's see. I'm trying to think of a good one. I had a few. I was thinking of two different ones today for you. Okay, this one keeps popping in my head.
You can always save some for next time too.
Yeah. So I've had different acting teachers over the years. My acting teacher that I had in Huntsville, Alabama, Peter Falk drew a picture of her for her.
Drew a picture. What was the picture of?
It was a portrait of my teacher.
I'm gonna guess that's true. Am I right?
That's true.
Ah,
that's very true.
Wow.
It's funny because when she told me this, I was at her house, her apartment in Huntsville. I took several classes with this teacher. She went to school in New York at Herbert Berghoff, but she was telling me this, and I had heard already that he had done portraits of people. And so she started to tell the story, and maybe I interrupted her. I wish I hadn't if I had, but I think she asked us about, what do you think, something about Peter Falk, And but anyway, I said, did he drew your picture? And she looked at me like, what? How did you know? But I had read that, somewhere. And so she said that she was on a street corner in New York in Manhattan, and he said, I would like to draw your picture. They were at a bus stop or something, stop sign, crossing the street.
Whoa, random.
Yeah, and she was like, sure. She was flattered, So yeah, he drew her picture.
Was he famous already?
Yeah,
when she saw him?
She knew who he was. Okay. She's like, whoa, it's Peter Falk.
He wasn't just a random stranger asking to paint her picture.
Well, maybe he's interested in her. I don't know.
Wow, that's so cool.
But maybe not, because I don't think they ever went out.
Very cool.
But yeah.
Okay, well, that's it for this episode of Trenchcoat Cigar Peugeot. We'd like to thank Maxime Gervais for our theme song, Columbo.
Thanks, Maxine.
Thank you very much. And if you'd like to add to our conversation, you could email us at trenchcoatcigar@gmail.com, or you can find us on Instagram at trenchcoatcigar. Paul, just one more thing.
Yeah.
Watch out for money-grubbing spouses.
Will do.
Thanks for listening.